Hello and welcome to High Fell again. Here we are, we're actually on St James's Quay and pulled up at the platform here. Got a rather smart looking BR corporate blue image Mark 1 standard corridor coach, which of course is a repainted version of one of the Maroon coaches. And whilst we're all waiting for the latest releases and everybody's wanting more and more stock, thought I'd just have a go at painting one of these, see how easy it is, how easy it was to convert it, and make a few changes. And what I'll do is I'm going to take this off the track in a moment and do a bit of a close-up and show you how I've done it. And if you want to have a go at enhancing or showing off your modelling skills, I'll show you how easy it is to do and what things you'll need to do it with. So a little bit of a close-up of what we've done. So seeing corporate blue and grey. I've altered the window frame sections. Now on a lot of the Mark 1s these would have actually been in the grey as well, but I couldn't find a suitable grey that would adhere to the glazing here, so I've actually used a chrome pen. I found it a little bit easier. We've also reinstated the loading gauge markers. We've also put some of the overhead flashes on as well. This does feature so it's renumbered, and it's one that's within a range of the Mark 1 coach. Also might not pick up quite so easily on this. If I get a bit closer, there you go, you can just pick up that it has actually got this extra white lining, so it doesn't just go straight from the blue to the grey. There is actually this extra white line which trims all the way around. I've also added some frame dirt underneath, which just helps pick out some of the detailing on the bogies, and just on the ends there, grey for the connecting door, and also may just pick out as well on the inside. I've actually painted the interior as well. I'm going to do lights on this, and also I've removed all the first class, made it second class, simply by removing the armrests on the chairs, and the ones off the doors obviously that's been painted over as well. And we've also introduced some more no smoking signs as well, something that towards the end of the 60s and 70s started to happen. So to convert from your regular Mark 1 coach, the first thing you need to do is actually get in and remove the chassis from the body. As I'm going through, I'll introduce you to some of the bits and pieces that I've used. So if we take the whole thing apart, basically you've got three main sections. The body is the bit we're going to be dealing with for doing like the painting. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove the corridor ends, and I'm also going to remove the glazing as well. Depending on how much glue has been used, again on this one it's not so bad, you can get these away without damaging them too much. You do have to be a bit careful. So the interiors, what I did on the other ones was just removed the armrest. Now, just like anything, you just do as little or as much as you want really, and then turned it from a this brown interior to a combination of the two colours used on the body, which is blue and grey. I found some colour references for that, so it would have been blue seats, and the majority of the inside panels were painted light grey, made them much lighter, more serviceable. And things like the carpets, so the floor area done in blue. And then with these, what I'll do is I'll pop some lights in like I've done previously, and some passengers, and then that will all sort of come to life. So next thing we'll do, we'll show you how we got that apart. I'm going to show you some of the things which I used to paint the coach. So first of all, the main colours to get the correct one. So I've used RailMatch. RailMatch has been around for quite a long time now, and you can either pick these up from your local model supplier. If you can't, I got these from House in Oxford. They also do mail order as well, so you can get these sent safely. So it's BR Rail Grey, BR Rail Blue, the codes there 1206 and 1207, and those are essentially the basic colours to achieve on that. Frame dirt, you can get a can of this. This is really useful for those of us that have not yet mastered airbrushes. These are dead useful. You can also get various other weathering aerosols as well for doing track and bits and pieces, if that is your desire. And then also I'm using satin varnish. This is a Humbrol one, but it is enamel because these are enamel paints, so I'm going to use an enamel varnish with it. A couple of other things which I found useful. So I picked up some of these various different paint and fibre pens. So this is a 0.03mm one, and I've used that to highlight the gap in the moulding. It shows to make the door a little bit more obvious. Just a little light down, draw down, and then when you enamel varnish it, that will just leave a small amount behind. Also a chrome pen, which is to do the window frames, because obviously these are painted red. It's not the finest, well, this is the finest I could get, which I think is 0.7mm. It's probably still a little bit big, but it's certainly better than my shaky paintbrush attempts. I always seem to get a stray hair on a paintbrush and it just ends up wiping down everything, so that was a lot easier to do there. But of course it would not be complete without all of the lining, and these come from RailTec, and they have a huge range of decals and numbers, and so there's actually 3 specific sheets here. Again, I'll put some links to what's what. So first of all, we've got the number sheet, and we've also got things like the various different codings for the loading gauge, so it's C1, C3, etc. Also, it's got things like the first class markers. Now I'm actually getting rid of first class on here. I'm going to make it all standard class. Then also things like the no smoking signs. There's already some decals on the frame, and because we're not repainting that, we're just going to weather that. We don't need to replace those at all. So you've got a series of numbers there. Also you've got the overhead power flashers, which started to become more prevalent, and again, if you find photo references of what you want to do, you'll find out where they were fitted and what. And then these are the lining kits, so these are the ones. It does take a little bit of time to do this, and hopefully I might be able to catch it on camera, show you how I managed to get it on. You can cut these into sections. I've found that the best way to do it for me is to cut sections between door handles, because the line is going to run basically between the doors and they're quite manageable. And then I managed to get the top one, which has no interruptions and no moulding underneath it, managed to get that to run in all in one length. Some other bits and pieces that you'll need. I also always have some of this Mascol, which is a liquid mask, and you can use that anything that you've not been able to catch with your masking tape, and masking up is hugely important to how well this comes out. You'll need some thinners, that's obviously to thin down any paint, but also to remove the existing markings. I use that to take off these yellow bits, so that when I paint it doesn't leave a lifted line. Decal Fix, I use that to help seat the transfers. Now, something I am going to do, I've done it on some Mark 1s already, and I haven't shown you a full weather in one of the coaches, but I'm going to use some black wash on the roof. This one, it does have a little bit of a bit more shine to it than what I would want, and so I'll give that a little, I'll dull that down again with some black wash. When it comes to refitting the glazing, I'm going to use this glue and glaze. You can actually make windows with this if it's small enough, and you can basically get it to stick round, use a pin or something, and between the plastic parts. But it's also really good for sticking anything that is windows, because if you use super glue, the fumes can fog up the windows. So something like glue and glaze is a really good way of getting those in. So that's pretty much all the things we'll do, and then we're going to use a knife to separate the glazing, and that's the next thing we're going to do. Is we're going to strip this down and remove all of the existing markings on it, so that we can mask it and then put it into, first of all, blue, and then add the grey on, and that's simply because it's easier getting the masking. I'm just going to show you the reason why is because on these coaches it's not grey all the way to the top. There is a thin section of blue between here and the roof. So I'm not painting the roof, but I will put a little bit of weathering on that as well. That'll get it a little bit more lifelike. I'm probably not going to do too much on the sides weathering wise, because these, I'm going to assume that because these are blue grey in the steam era, that they're quite newly repainted. So using a craft knife, just tease it into behind the glazing pat strip where there is no glue, and then you can just gently start to lift and it will break the glue bond. You should be careful, because what you don't want to do is shatter these all to pieces, because this is the little cutout that locates the chassis. So if you damage it all, you're going to have a wobbly chassis, and nobody likes that. So I've got a couple of different sizes. Again, don't rush at it, just take your time. If it does break, don't worry too much, because as long as you get all the pieces, you can recover it and fit it in place. The top of the glazing strip is held in by these little pegs here, so they'll seat it, and then of course, because it's three-dimensional, it does actually locate inside the window frames of the body. So now this end one is just a little bit more tricky, because there's a little bit more glue being applied. I know sometimes when people complain about models having bits that come loose, it must be a real challenge for model makers in the factories to put sufficient glue that it holds everything, but not so much that it doesn't go everywhere. So I wouldn't want to think I was doing it. Okay, so we're getting close to being able to release one of the glazing strips, and so that's one of those come out, and it's come out intact. The weak points on these are always this little thin section here, and when you're doing various little jobs on, you can just catch them, and they are so delicate they can break easily. I said I was going to convert this to open class or standard class, and I will actually remove the first class, so it's quite easy to take it off the body, because we're just going to use some thinners to lift all of this yellow branding off. But the thing that's a little bit more tricky is to remove the printed section on here, and to do that I'm not going to use thinners, because that will take away the surface of the plastic, and so you will end up with that marking up. So what we're going to do is we're just going to literally chop the end off a cotton bud and just use that to polish away, and that will remove it. All you have to do is work it across here. Takes just a little bit of time. Nice squeaky noise there, and you can just see it starting to pick up the transfer. Again, it's worth spending your time doing these little jobs. Right, okay, so if we look now, you can see that has lifted the transfer off, and we've not been left with any marking at all. So happy with that. So I'll continue with the rest of those, and we'll come back in a moment. So I was saying how delicate these are. This one, the second side did break away, and the reason for it is, if I show you, quite a lot more glue on the inside. It also run down up onto the top section, so it was gripping it in two different places. As I say, if you're providing you don't actually break across the window, which is very rare, it's only really these support sections, that will be sufficient that when that's glued in place, that will work fine. So don't panic if that happens. What I would suggest you do though is where there's lumps of glue left on here, just with a knife, just gently take those off and prepare the surface ready for when you want to reattach everything. It's a lot easier to do it now. The other thing that you'll need to do is also make some small cuts to remove the corridor ends. They look like they're clipped in, but if you try unclipping them, you'll find that they've actually been almost sort of heated over at an angle to lock them in. So I found the easiest thing to do is just to release them by cutting the tabs off at the back like this, and then these slide out, and then when we come to reattach those, we'll just put a couple of dabs of super glue on those and they'll be fine. So that's what we're ending with there. What I'm doing is I'm going to go the original hand painted style for the Mark 1, which means it's going to have blue sides and blue ends, and then we'll do the door in grey. So I'll do the other one and I'll come back when we're ready to start stripping this. So it's corridor ends off. I've tidied up the glue on the inside, and then the next thing to do is to remove all of the painted yellow sections. So just with some thinners on a cotton bud, just going to add that on. I say it's yellow, if you actually look, there's a section of black in there as well. And the reason, as I say, why we're doing that is so that there's no chance of the raised sections of the printing showing through. First we're just going to get it damp, and then you'll just see how easy that was to remove. If you're going to do something like just a basic renumbering, just delicate amount of thinners will lift that without taking any of the base colour off. That makes that quite an easy job as well. Rather than press on too hard using thinners itself, using the chemical action of it to lift, and then you don't end up with a lot of marks in the plastic. So you can see how that's coming away there, and the lining starts to lift. So you've got this strip around the top, one along the centre line, and the numbers and the classifications on the doors. So I shall press on with that, and I shall come back to you when we're all ready to mask. So we've removed all of the lettering, the lines, and also the markings on the end, the C1, which is the classification for the loading gauge. We've stripped back all of the first class markings off the windows. What I've done is, because I was using quite a bit of thinners on this, I've just given this a wash and a scrub with a nail brush, and I'm just going to let that dry now, just with some warm water by the way, and then and that just gets rid of the greasiness of the thinners. I'll let that dry off. I might just give that a little bit of a light wipe over with some isopropyl alcohol IPA, and just to evacuate any kind of moisture from there and prepare that surface so that the paint adheres well. And then the next thing I'm going to do is, because I can and for a bit of fun, we're going to make these sections here, which are nominally first class, we're going to make them into second class. And in the moulding, basically the difference is these have got armrests, these haven't. Actually, when you come to put figures in, you'll find it a lot easier as well if these armrests aren't there. So all we need to do with a craft knife, you can shorten down. I'm just going to put this on because there's some pegs on the bottom, so I'm just going to pop that on there so that it doesn't squash those little pegs. It's quite easy, just put a little bit of pressure on, down like that, and I'm going to use my slightly smaller knife to get in here. And all you need to do is then run that at seat height. If you're wondering why I'm spending all this time just to do that, for something you can't actually see because it's Bank Holiday Monday and it's blowing a gale, and it's just a little bit of fun. Don't mind doing it. Same as painting an interior. It's one of those things. I think I used to do this when I was a kid, actually, and super detailing as it was called back then. The models were a lot more basic, and so anything you could do to add some more detail on just felt like you were engaging with the hobby properly, like the old people that tell you to count your rivets. So all I'm going to do is work my way through there. I'm going to take those off, and we'll give that a base coat of the grey. So we'll be doing a base coat of blue on the coach when we've masked it off, and a base coat of grey on this, and we'll be adding the alternative colours to it in a moment. Here we go, just giving this a quick coating of grey, and that'll just lift the interior. So we'll put some blue in there as well, just for some contrast, and then once that's tucked away inside with some passengers in, some lighting, that should just give us a nice impression of a 1970s or 1960s, 70s, into the 80s Mark 1. Going to use this chrome marker pen, and that is going to, I'm very careful, I'll cover over the red that's on the window frames. Mark 1s came with both aluminium and body coloured frames, so I'm not good enough to be able to get the required finish with a paintbrush, so using the pen is a much easier way. One of those jobs you just take your time, and just paint it in. And if I get up there, you should be able to see the difference. The most important thing is just to make sure that it's not that maroony red colour on there, because that will just look really weird against the blue and the grey. So I shall continue with these, and soon we should be ready for masking up the coach body. Well, that's gone quite quickly, that, and so I've just carefully to lift this one up. You should be able to just catch, that's basically all of the frames and also the grill, the toilet grills as well, just being done in the chrome pen. So I'm going to let those go, and because we're so quick still, I think the next thing I'm going to do is also do a little bit of frame dirt on the chassis here. What I've done, I find if you remove the couplings, they work better than if you spray them with frame dirt. They do seem to sort of just pick up a little bit and don't like working as much. So again, using the aerosol outside, I'll just go and do that. Just giving this quite a light going over. Probably looks a little bit heavier as it's still slightly damp. When that dries, that'll just calm back down again. And then also I'll just run some IPA over the wheels and just clean the wheel surfaces up. Not because there's any contacts on there, but it's just better not to have a load of paint and things like that, because that'll just get transferred to the rails. And then I think we are now going to be ready for doing some masking. So the way we're going to do this, we're going to mask the roof, and that's all, and then the rest of the body is going to get the first coat in blue. And what I do is I take my masking and I have it shorter than the overall length that I'm going to mask off. And the reason for that is you can get to this end, do your straight line, have another piece from this end, overlap, and then that should be perfectly aligned at each end. Don't try and use regular household masking tape that you'd use on the decorating, just won't get the edge good enough. It's usually easily available from model shops, or actually even my local department store stocks this, along with various other modelling accessories. So once you've got your edge in, what you need to do is make sure you get it nice and firmly pressed in, because that is what's going to help stop the paint bleed. If you just put it down too lightly, you're not going to have it masked in the right place, spending time and getting the masking accurate is well worth it, because it's a whole lot easier to get it right at this stage than it is to try and recover it later on. So you can see we're a little bit short on that end, which is intentional. And cut another piece of masking, and then we're going to apply. Now we're coming back from this corner, and that means we can get a nice crisp line on this end. Just push that in again, make sure that is pressed in. So that's really the trick of it, getting around this corner. That's why I've also got the liquid mask. So I'll go with tape in any sections which the tape is not coming up to. Then you can just dab in some of the liquid mask as well and just take that to the edge. So I shall press on and mask the rest of the roof. There we go, one roof masked out. I haven't actually used any of the liquid mask. I should get it all with the tape. Do give it a good look. So what we're looking to be able to see is no grey, and because that's the bit we want to retain, and the rest of it for now is going to go in blue. So I shall now mount that onto another chopstick, and then before I paint it, I'll just give it a little light wipe with some IPA just to lift any greasy fingerprints off and things like that, and then just give it its first coat of blue. There we go. That's a wafting over of the blue paint. Everything, it's kind of gone everywhere. There's some bits into the windows where we'll catch that with a later coat. Don't worry if this is your first time doing it. If you see it and you see a lot of orange peel, don't panic. Let it dry. The various chemical carriers for the paint will start to evaporate, and that will start to settle down quite quickly. The important thing with everything like this is to build up the colour with layers rather than try and get it all on in one go. I would also recommend that you don't go wet on wet. In other words, don't try and apply more paint over the top of this until this has started to go off. Otherwise you'll find that the thinners and that carries the paint effectively will just react, and it'll all start to go blobby and run. So overnight if necessary, let it dry and then give it another coat. It's not a race, there's no rush for it, and the more time you spend on doing this, the better the finish that you'll get. So next instalment tomorrow. Well, it's the next day, and before I give the body its second coat of blue, just wanted to show you what happens when you've actually left this with a chance to dry. It's been drying overnight, and you can see the orange peel has all disappeared. It's really calmed down. The paint has basically sunk into all of the contours of the moulding, so you haven't got those sort of blobby looking bits. So if you've never done anything like this before, that's just to give you an idea what it's going to look like once you've actually put the first layers of paint on. If you've never actually used aerosols or painted anything like this, I would suggest, if you've got something, rather than go straight in on your favourite model or something like that, or an expensive piece of kit, have a bit of practice. Even if you're picking up second-hand toys, local second-hand shop or a charity shop, and just give it a bit of a go and see how things look. Right, to the next coat of paint.